Hey guys, it's Luca from Learning MTG, and today I wanted to talk about a topic. It's basically like when to use averages and when to think of things in terms of thresholds. So it's like thresholds versus averages. It comes up a lot in a lot of like probabilistic decision making. So that could be whether you're investing or whether you're playing a game that involves probability. Could be like Magic or poker where there's randomness in what card comes next off of the deck, or it could be something like, for example, where there's hidden information like League of Legends. You don't know what's going on in the fog of war, but you could maybe calculate some kind of percentage like, oh, there's a 50% chance the jungler is ganking bot and 50% chance they're ganking mid, something like that. So this works for any situations where there is some randomness or some uncertainty, basically, where you're trying to make decisions that could have different outcomes in the future. So, what do I mean by this? Um, well, let's think about a game of Magic, right? So, let's say you're in a damage race with your opponent, and whoever can present the most damage per turn wins. Okay, so let's say we've got scenario A. In scenario A, there's a 1/3 chance that you put 10 power on the board, they put 0 power on the board. Maybe there's a 1/3 chance that you put 9 power on the board, they put 1 power on the board, and there is a 1/3 chance you put 4 power, they put 5 power. And let's do another one too. Let's say there's a chance that you put 3 power, they put 4 power on the board. Okay. But basically, the way this game works is whichever person gets the most points wins. So if all of these outcomes have equal probabilities, you're going to win 50% of the time, and you're going to lose 50% of the time, right? Because half the situations 10-0-9-1, half the situations 4-5-3-4. So you're winning in the top two and losing in the bottom two. So the accurate way to think about this is, okay, it's 50% win, 50% loss. The way you don't want to think about it is you don't want to think about it in terms of averages. Okay, so it would be incorrect to say, okay, 10 plus 9, 19, plus 7, 26, divided by 4, it's 6.5. So on average, I get a 6.5. I think that's how it works out, yeah. And then over here, the average is 10, so on average, it's 2.5. So I'm way ahead because on average, I'm 6.5 and my opponent is 2.5 on average, right? That's not, for certain situations, that's okay. You can do averages, but in this situation, it's not. Because in this situation, it's what I call a threshold. So once you cross that threshold, the threshold is crossed. It doesn't matter by how much you cross the threshold, right? This 10-0 is equivalent to like a 1-0, right? It's kind of like soccer or something. If you win by 10 goals, it's effectively the same as winning by 1 goal. This 9-1 would be the same as like a 9-8. So this is really the main concept, is you want to know when to think in averages and when to think in terms of thresholds. So in something like Magic, you often want to think in terms of thresholds. You want to think about, okay, if I make this decision, how many outcomes do I win the game, and how many outcomes do I lose the game? Sometimes you could use shortcuts and say, am I going to draw average 2 more cards than my opponent, or am I going to be able to put more creatures into play than my opponent? Sometimes you may want to use that as like a heuristic. Think about an average, but in general, the game outcomes are binary in something like Magic, and you really want to think about things in terms of wins and losses, and not by how much you win or by how much you lose, right? This also comes into play a lot when people think about decks. Sometimes they'll play a deck and it feels like they're just crushing their opponent. You know, I play I don't know, like a turn 1 5/5 and then a turn 2 5/5 and I kill them and they had no chance. Um, would you rather play a deck that crushes your opponent 80% of the time and then loses a close game 20% of the time, or would you rather play a deck that wins a close game 85% of the time and gets destroyed 15% of the time, right? You'd rather play the second deck. So, and it's the same key idea, which is like it doesn't matter by how much you win or by how much you lose. All that matters is whether you win or lose. In this situation, where ultimately, all the information of the game gets boiled down into one number. Is it a 1 or a 0, a win or a loss? Okay. So this is going to be different in investing. In investing, let's say you had an investment that gives you 100% return in 1 year 80% of the time, and a 0% return 20% of the time, and you had an investment, I'm kind of using this magic example here. It gives you like a 10% return 85% of the time, and it gives you a negative 10% return 15% of the time. Which ones of these investments would you want? You would definitely want this first one. And that's because in this situation, you don't want to think about thresholds. You do want to think about averages. It does matter that you get a really good return when it's positive, and it does matter how badly your negative returns are. So, very straightforward idea, very important. A lot of people don't understand this concept. So, a lot of people, if you put forth an investment, and you're like, hey, this investment's going to make you money 80% of the time, you're losing money 20% of the time. This other investment's going to make you money half the time, losing money half the time. Some people will be like, oh, I'll take the first investment. But that's actually incorrect thinking. You want to know by how much does it make you money when it wins, and how much does it lose you money when it loses. There's also other reasons why averages are important in investing, and it's because you can mix different investments together and you can cancel out the risks, and you can average your investments together. Whereas you can't do that in situations with thresholds. So, this is kind of a quick video. It's a very basic concept in terms of, the difficulty of understanding the concept, but it's a very important concept. And so when you're involved in decision making, thinking about probabilities, thinking about the future, you really do want to say, okay, is this a scenario where I care about crossing some threshold and I don't care about getting past it? Or is it a situation where I do care about the averages and then I can, analyze the situation based on averages? I guess I'll give you a third situation, and this is kind of a mix between averages and thresholds. And this comes from economic theory. What do they call it? Utility theory in economics. And this is basically, it's basically saying, let's say I give you $1 million and you're completely broke. That's going to be worth a lot. But if I give you another $1 million when you already have $1 million, it's not going to be worth nearly as much as that first $1 million. So it's basically saying like there's diminishing returns to money. And so then it is going to kind of affect your decisions in a way, and you don't want to use averages again, right? If I gave you a situation where, you either, here's a kind of bet that a lot of people think about, which is like, okay, I'll give you $1 million 50% of the time, and I'll give you $0 50% of the time, right? So you take a bet where it's like all or nothing. or I'll give you, say, like 200 grand with 100% probability. I think for a lot of people it would be correct to do this one, and it was kind of for similar reasons that I mentioned before. It's like the first 200 grand can be worth a lot more than the last 200 grand. Because your utility is kind of changing. It's becoming less and less valuable to you. So that's another thing you want to think about. It's kind of related to a threshold concept in the sense that it's like, well, if I can get past this certain barrier, then I don't really care much about how much over the barrier goes. Like, for example, let's say if you had 100 grand, you could start that business you always wanted to start, or maybe if you had 100 grand, you could go on some kind of vacation that you always want to go on, and everything past that's just kind of gravy. It's not worth a lot, but breaking past that 100 grand is really important to you. Then you're kind of thinking in terms of thresholds now. So this is kind of a mix between the thresholds and averages. It's done a lot in economic theory, utility theory, in terms of saying like how much utility do you get from different varying amounts of money, and pretty much for everyone, the first bit of money you get is worth more than getting that same amount again. So what does that tell you in life? It tells you that if you're going to put a certain amount of effort to make a certain amount of money and you feel kind of content, then you probably shouldn't do that same thing again. You probably shouldn't exert that same amount of effort for the same amount of money. If you're going to make the same amount of money, you'd want to exert less effort. So yeah, that's it for the video. Pretty basic concept, like I've said many times, but it's very important, especially for those of you who play lots of strategy games. You really want to think about thresholds when they are important, and you don't want to fall into the trap of calculating averages when it's not. And this also goes into investing. You want to think about your life and what would your life look like if your portfolio doubled? What would it look like if it tripled, quadrupled? What would it look like if you lost all your money? Right? You don't want to just calculate an average. You want to think about, maybe doubling your money. The benefits you get from that would not outweigh the costs of losing half your money, right? So you'd rather play it safer in that case, because you'd be in a ton of trouble if you lost a certain amount of money. So it comes into play when thinking about risk. So that's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.